Assalamu alaikum, Shahid.
Walaikum salam.
All right, where are you joining us from?
From Malaysia.
Malaysia. Allahu Akbar. We are worldwide, people. Mr. Worldwide. It's the Dale life, Dale. No. So, how are you doing, Shahid? Are you ethnically from Malaysia? Or are you from somewhere else living in Malaysia?
I was born here, but I'm mixed blood.
Okay, mixed race. Okay, well, wow, interesting. Go on, tell us a bit of your diversity. What's because you're just gonna have us guessing.
Uh, well, Malay, Chinese, Indian,
Wow.
Dutch,
Okay. Wow.
and
Whoa.
British,
Okay. You turned the
and
volume
French.
right up there. I mean, what was was that? What like the colonial division of the?
Yeah, sort of.
They were just splitting the whole world up. Allahu Akbar. Quite a bit. Wow. You know what? I envy you for all the relatives that you've got in different parts of the world and excuses you have to travel to different countries. I love it. So, all right. So, Shahid, what do you do in Malaysia? Tell us a bit about
Um,
you.
Electrical engineer.
Logical engineer. What is a logical engineer?
Electrical.
Oh, wow. I thought what, logical engineer. I was genuinely curious. Like, what does a logical engineer do? So, okay. So, electrical engineer. All
Yeah.
right. Awesome. So, mashallah. Talk to us, Shahid. What are some thoughts? If there's a question? What's on your mind? Unleash that wisdom all the way from Malaysia. Is it Kuala Lumpur, by the way?
No, about 3 hours away.
Okay, unleash it on us. All right.
I watched your old videos about you talk about Adam, and they mention Adam being min nafsin wahida.
Okay. Yes.
And you saying that probably he's the child instead.
Right. Okay. No. Right. Okay. Ask the question, then
Yep.
I'll try. Yeah, sure.
But then after they got the child, they committed shirk and giving thanks to a different god. Right.
Right. Okay.
So
okay.
if he's the start of consciousness, how can they have the concept of gods and stuff before that?
Okay. Vah. I like it, Shahid. You should have told me you're going to come prepared. No, so first of all, okay, that's not quite how I say it. So I'll just give you some, but I think this is a really good question, by the way, really good question. So, first of all, what I've said is that in the Quran, I think it's 6 places where Allah says we created mankind. But in none of those verses, the name Adam is used. So he says, خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن نَفْسٍ وَاحِدَةٍ ثُمَّ خَلَقَ مِنْهَا زَوْجَهَا وَبَثَّ مِنْهُمَا رِجَالًا كَثِيرًا وَنِسَاءً. And many verses, a few verses like this, that خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن ذَكْرٍ وَأُنثَى. But in none of those verses does Allah say we created you. In those verses, there's a certain template, and it doesn't seem to mention Adam in them. So Adam is mentioned in other verses on many occasions, but not in those verses where it's speaking about the humankind origin. Right. So it just seems to mention you were made from a single soul, and from a single self, and then from that self, its partner, and then from here, many men and women were eventually made, and so on. So okay, now in one of those verses it says that they feared that what happened is it doesn't say Adam, but it says as he covered his his spouse. It doesn't say spouse, but his partner, that's in the female, she was of womb. And then when she gave birth, it mentions that they commit shirk, that they do, they ascribe shuraka lillah because they fear that maybe the baby won't survive or something. And so what the verse is touching on is superstition that exists. And it then mentions that obviously it goes on to say that, so some people have said, you're right, some people have said that was Adam. But I've said that I didn't agree with that understanding that the person committing shirk was Adam, but this must have been a predecessor to Adam. Okay, so somebody before Adam that would have existed. So most ulama all agree that creatures existed before Adam. So Adam was not the first creature. Now they disagree, was he the first human, as in we know humans? But obviously back then the scholars didn't, there wasn't much evidence of other findings as well, so other bones and other things, and they don't really know these things with that kind of detail. So what we have is basically we have very ancient bones, and we have findings that show us that, look, humans have varied along the way. And then you have humans today, Homo sapiens, with a certain kind of DNA. Neanderthal DNA is different. It varies, Heidelbergensis would be different. There will be Homo habilis will be different. Australopithecus would be different. All these things would be slight variations, but there's a great similarity coming down. Now, even with Homo sapien, it seems to be a long trek, but it's only in the recent 100,000 years that really this human journey as we know it has started. This kind of out of Africa journey begins. So the question is, well, where does Adam fit in with all of this? So, well, okay, ultimately we don't know. Nobody knows as a fact. Nobody knows, well, I was there. I know. Nobody knows. So we can only just speculate. So one way of speculating is saying, well, Adam somehow exists before all of these. So he's at the beginning of, so let's say hominins go back maybe anything between, I don't know, let's say 4 million years. Some have said whether it's 7 million, depends where you place the marker. Now, for some reason, we place them there. Let's say we place them 2 million years with Homo erectus and Homo augusta and these kind of where they discover fire. But we know the humans that lived then were not like humans today. They were not sophisticated. They were very primitive. They were very, they could make tools. So they were slightly cleverer than chimpanzees, but they weren't that much cleverer than chimpanzees. They were probably somewhat cleverer than chimpanzees and stuff, but they weren't as clever as, let's say, a 5-year-old child. They weren't that clever because obviously we have findings from, they didn't produce things that lasted. They didn't, but they did live. But we know Adam, let's say if those who believe in Adam believe Adam was very sophisticated, was incredibly intelligent. So then you only can have one of two ways. Let's say he existed then. So what we're saying is Adam existed. He was incredibly intelligent. He dies. Humans somehow become really primitive and clumsy and dumb. And then they stay dumb for, let's say, 4 million years. And then suddenly they become intelligent again. And then they become really intelligent again. So that's one theory. Let's say some people could put it. The other theory is no, when humans became suddenly what they call the cognitive revolution, the person who began that is Adam, and we are all his offspring. So that's the other theory of looking at it. So somebody could choose anything. Somebody could say, no, I want to believe, because nobody has any proof about Adam alayhi salam, whether he existed and where he existed. And I can't say for a fact that Adam alayhi salam existed at that point or at this point. This is all speculation, but everybody's speculating. So if a person was to say, look, Adam alayhi salam existed before Homo erectus, and then he was just this really intelligent person, let's say even if his sons were, but for some reason they die, then the DNA changes, because remember, the DNA keeps changing. And in that case, our DNA from back then is not 100% the same. So we then are DNA, we are varied from that being back then. The other thing is why there's 4 million years of just becoming animals again. Like they're just like animal. Homo erectus, they're not, they're hominins, but they're very animal-like. They're not like us-like, they're more them-like. So for so many millions of years, at least 2 million years, this is going on. Then suddenly, all of a sudden, humans become really inspired and they become everything. So, okay, somebody could believe that. If they want to believe it, that's fine. The other way is that, well, no, when the cognitive revolution begins, that is Adam. Now, that would mean, let's say you took this route, the cognitive revolution route, then in that case, before Adam, hominins exist, but they just don't have consciousness the way we have it. But they have some consciousness, because look, even animals have some consciousness. Primates, monkeys today even have some consciousness. Dolphins have consciousness. Elephants are self-aware. That, like, some consciousness already exists even today in animals. It's like, and it's not a low level. It's a pretty good level for given the animal status. Like, elephants will mourn the dead. They have memories. They remember, even after a decade, they will remember, oh, this person, this place. They, chimpanzees, they very sophisticated for their own thing, and hominins were more sophisticated than them. So Neanderthals were much more obviously cleverer than chimpanzees. So in that case, let's go with this theory that the hominins that existed would have had some level of a higher consciousness, just not like us, though, the way we can do it. And they would have been the forerunners to this huge revolution, which would have began with one person. In this case, in this theory, would have been Adam alayhi salam, and he would have ate something. Now, according to some people, that would have been what they call the stoned man theory, or the stoned ape theory, some scientists call it, is that he would have consumed some kind of psychedelic, which they feel maybe some particular strains of mushrooms or certain things that are millions of years old. So they are, in fact, much older than, all us kind of beings. So they've been existing, and things like mushrooms, by the way, are not from the plant kingdom. They are a separate entity. So they are actually closer to humans than plants are closer to, so they are a separate entity. Fungi is not a plant, even though it grows, mycelium grows like roots and stuff, but it's not to be confused with it being a plant, even though we eat it. But it's not a vegetable. Mushrooms are not technically vegetables. They are fungi. So, and they have communicating networks. So they have a form of, even today, trees communicate, but they communicate through mycelium, through mushroom roots under the earth. So according to this theory, that many hominins for time had been consuming these things, and it had been edging up the consciousness, but it just hadn't exploded. It needed that final explosion. And that, according to this theory, some person did it. Now, could that person who consumes this forbidden fruit be Adam alayhi salam? Could this story still coincide? Certain people believe it can. I also agree that it can. It doesn't have any clash. It seems to also make sense that this is. And why would it be a forbidden fruit? Well, it would make sense because mushrooms are also very deadly. They also kill people. They also kill creatures. So it's one of those, potluck. It could kill you. It could just be food, or it could give you a transcendental experience of, witnessing. So in this theory, the predecessors, the pre-Adamites, wouldn't have had the same consciousness, but they would have had some. And they may have had rituals. They may have had superstitions. They may have had a kind of ascribing for life. Like even Franz de Waal, in his book on Bonobo and the Atheist, speaks about, is it possible that monkeys have got superstitions? And he says that even though it's right now impossible to prove, but he says it's possible. And he speaks of the rain dance that some of them do in that particular book. But it's possible that these people had some shirk at their level. Obviously, they weren't mukallaf in that way. They weren't, insan. but they would have been bashar, as Dr. Abdul Sabur Shaheen distinguishes them. But this is just a theory. People, obviously there's no proof that any of this happened in that way. Just as the other thing is still a theory. If a person wants to believe that no, Adam came in the beginning, he came several million years ago, and then everybody kind of stooped. Humanity wasn't humans; they were more animals for millions of years, and then suddenly, in the last 100,000 years, they became humans again. Then that's it's how does the person want to fit it? To me, I agree with those people that say this makes sense. Somebody could say no, I want to go with the other way. It's entirely up to them.
Could it be that like the verse where God told the angels that He's gonna bring a Khalifa?
Yeah.
Yeah. So could the Khalifa not be actually a human or individual, but instead the concept of consciousness itself? So God will give consciousness to a group of humans.
Khalifa is an embodiment. It's okay. So it's a metaphor for consciousness.
Yeah. So when he gives that to a group of people, they can inherit the world instead of having one individual. So that we are part of that Khalifa also.
Wow, I mean, that's not the common understanding, but I like what you're saying. I mean, it's very profound. It's it's very spicy. I like it. I mean, it's I suppose it's just a different way of looking at things, and it's like, wow,
because when the angels say they will cause destruction, I'm sure that's referring to us. No, yeah, so I think referring to us also. So we cause fossil fuels pollution and all this. So I think the Khalifa must be part of us also, because we are also causing the problems.
Yeah. You see, I think those people who say this theory, the cognitive revolution theory, they are saying this, but they're saying it in personified as the man, as Adam is the one that consciousness is given to. And this is what the angels are objecting to. If you're saying that here, let's say this is an allegory, a metaphor for saying Khalifa is in itself referring to consciousness itself as the noun, as we are now placing consciousness on the earth. It gives it a very much different flavor, although the story is still very much the same. It doesn't change the story, because obviously Adam is, according to us, the first being of consciousness, of our true consciousness. So yeah, but it just gives it a whole different flavor. Allah is saying it's not about a person. He's saying we are giving consciousness. We are giving earth consciousness, or placing consciousness onto earth. That is wow. I like what you're saying. I mean, it definitely adds spice and flavor to it, and
also another part of that seems like the world and nature and evolution is going to a point where we will be able to recognize the world. Like, how we can see the moon, and the size of the moon relative to the sun is also equal to the distance between the moon and the sun. So that it's like 400 times different. So when the moon goes over the sun, it becomes a full eclipse, where it doesn't happen anywhere else. And then in physics, that helps us because we can see more of the sun, and part of the time will be hidden so that we can see the corona and stuff. But then it only will be applied if there's something that can recognize it.
Okay, so sorry, that part kind of went over me. Like, are you saying like consciousness? Are you speaking about the Earth becoming conscious?
No. So it seems like in evolution, going towards a creature that can be aware.
Okay.
So that when it reaches that point, then maybe we'll be given consciousness. Because the Earth been around for 4.5 billion years. We have dinosaurs.
Yes. So yes, of course. So it's when the time is ready, when the stage is set.
Yes.
Allah says, "Now, inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa."
Yeah. So that's what my feeling is. Yeah.
Wow. No, of course. So creation, life has existed for so long, even since the Cambrian explosion, at least, you're talking almost 500 million years, and mammals have been around between 200 to 300 million years. But it's not, and even hominins, as in human-like structures, have been around for at least a couple to a few million years. But it's, we are like we're just like a second on this clock. When we put it into perspective, we're just like one. That's it. And yet so much has happened in this. It's amazing. We've unlocked the whole, and people attributed to Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu the saying that زعمت أنك جرم صغير, that you claim that you are this small entity, وفيك أنت والعالم الأكبر, yet within you is the cosmos, kind of all folded up. Because you see, the universe truly, in a way, it's as Alan Watts says, that it comes to see itself through our eyes, because we are the observer, ain't we? In essence, when you think about it, we are it is through our consciousness that we recognize it, and we recognize its life, and that which is witnessing and that which is witnessed. You see, wa shahidin wa mashhud. Allah, was-sama'i dhatil buruj, that wa shahidin wa mashhud, that we are ultimately, in many ways, the universe witnessing ourselves. It's incredibly profound. But yeah, I love what you're saying as well, Shahid. Wow, you definitely surprised us at this late hour. So shukran for that.
Can I add a second question?
Yeah, sure.
Partially related.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
In story of Ibrahim, when when I read it, my understanding is like he went out of the city, sit on a hill, and then when night came, he saw a star, and it disappears, and he saw the moon, and it disappears, and he saw the sun, right? But before that, God says, we show him in the sky. But to me, like, I don't think he was blind. I think he he's seen it for the last 20 years or so. So what does the show there mean?
Yeah, so you see, I'll have to bring the verse up, but what I would believe, because I've got a video on Ibrahim alayhi salam, and I advise people to watch. It's an older video, but it's about, according to my research, he is from the Indus Valley, or his origins are definitely from the Indus Valley. And I feel, this is according to me, definitely. I'm not saying it's definite as a fact, because obviously as a fact, we can't prove that Ibrahim alayhi salam existed as a fact. It's a matter of faith. So
I think we could.
Can we? How?
Because the star that appears and disappears, there cannot be a star. It has to be a planet. Because
no, I mean the what I mean is the person of Ibrahim alayhi salam is a person that we believe he existed. It's a matter of faith. We can't, as a fact, prove he exists. That's what I was saying. Because obviously, whether the person existed, we can't prove. Like, you can't prove, like, there's no bones, there's no DNA, there's nothing to say this person with this name. As a fact, as a historical artifact, archaeologically speaking, you can't prove Moses. You can't even prove Jesus. But you can prove the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But you can't prove the others.
But I think we can prove the astronomical event.
Oh yes, no, of course, no. So I'm not. So we obviously, as Muslims, believe in it. So what I was saying, the reason I just mentioned that is because I said I definitely believe he was from the Indus Valley, and then I was just qualifying the word definitely by saying, look, this is my opinion. Obviously, I don't mean definitely, because I can't prove that. But then again, nobody can even prove that he existed. Yeah. It's obviously a matter of faith and a matter of opinion and perspective. That's what I was saying. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, according to my understanding, was somebody he would have been of Indus Valley, so of ancient Indian origin. That Indian, not Indian as in Indian, but Indus Valley origin. Now, what we know is that civilization was, and still remains to be, deeply, or the kind of whatever remnants you have, deeply involved in astrological affairs. So this whole thing about astrology and the stars. And in that video, I highlight that I believe he would have been from the priestly class, which, and many people have highlighted the overlap between Brahmin and Brahman and Abram, because he changes his name according to the Bible, and even according to the Quran, the name changes. But it's his name was not Ibrahim or even Abraham. It was Abram, and then it changes into something. So the overlaps are significant. According to that theory, Ibrahim alayhi salam would have been very well versed with the stars and all this astrology. And this is why he was from he was from that class. And even according to the Bible, his family, they say they were from Ur. So in the Old Testament, it says he was from Ur, which is northeast, is the upper part of Iraq. But it says his family originally were from the east. It says that in the Bible. So, but it just doesn't explain where from the east. And I've mentioned that would have been the Indus Valley, and after the flood, they would have moved further westwards. So if he had this knowledge, and he was from the priestly class, as the Bible mentions, his father was a priest and so on. So he would have had this knowledge, and he would have understood stars. So when Allah is saying that we had showed him the celestial bodies, because he had a very good knowledge of them, and it wasn't just and this is why when he's saying look at this star, in the Quran he points out just celestial bodies, because there is a deep link there between that old priestly class and the astrology. And even when he comes to Egypt, you see, what I postulate in my theory is that Hajar, who often people say is a slave girl, was not a slave girl. She was a priestess, because it would make sense that he's honored with a priestess. But maybe the priestess to Sarah is considered as, like, they treat her as though she's a slave because of her kind of outcast. They look at her as though she's some kind of different caste kind of, and people treat her like as though she's some slave because she's a foreigner, but she's not actually a slave. That she in essence was a priestly woman, because the priestly women also lived in the palaces of the Pharaoh. And it makes sense why Abraham would have had an audience with the Pharaoh, because why would a person who just comes get a one-on-one with the Pharaoh? Like, why?
Yeah.
What's so special about any man? Because the Pharaoh wouldn't just meet normal people. And the reason he would have met him is because he would have been this incredibly wise person about astrology, about the stars and things, because the pharaohs were also into that. And this is why when he, according to this understanding, he sends with Abraham Hajar, he gives her, and obviously Abraham marries her. Now they go off towards Arabia. Now it's interesting that you see one of the most sacred stars in Egyptian astrology, what they call Osiris, the special ancient Egyptian, Osiris, who he is, the great figure of, he's like one of the most beloved heroes of the god heroes of Egyptian mythology, is Canopus in English today. And that is the major star of the southern hemisphere. You can't see it in the northern hemisphere where we are. So this star Canopus is in Arabic Suhail, which is the star which in line with which the wall of the Kaaba is built. It's aligned with Suhail.
Okay.
So it's interesting that, yes, this could be a coincidence, or it could be, and Canopus appears, Suhail appears on the horizon after sunset. It appears in a straight angle right there, you see on the horizon. That's why they knew which direction Suhail is in. And Allah says in the Quran about the ancient people, وَبِالنَّجْمِ هُمْ يَهْتَدُونَ, that they are guided through the astrological kind of bodies. So this shows that it would make sense as well, because he goes with Hajar and then he builds the Kaaba. And that she was also, because Suhail was not a star that the northern hemisphere was so familiar with, you see, because whereas this is more in the southern hemisphere. And I'm showing, these are obviously speculative They don't change anything. The story is still the same. Everything is the same. It just has a different detail to it. That's really fascinating, and it just gives an answer to some questions like, why did the pharaoh meet him? Why was the Kaaba built in a certain way in line with certain stars? Why did, like these things? It just adds, why is it that Ibrahim alayhi salam is being mentioned as giving the example of celestial bodies in the Quran? It just kind of gives a little flavor to it. That's the story remains the same, even if somebody says no, none of that is true. He's just he's always from let's say northeastern Iraq, and he always he just got lucky and met the pharaoh, and he just, whether you have a totally different version, the story is still the same. It doesn't really change. It just gives it a different flavor, that's all.
So the story of the idols being broken could be in India instead of in Mesopotamia.
No. So they would have long left that Indian thing because of the floods. So either he wasn't alive at the time or he was very young when they've left from the flood. Because what happens in history, you see the Indus Valley civilization comes to an end.
Yeah.
And when it comes to an end, where do the people go? So the general historians and anthropologists say they migrated westwards. So they went towards, because where did the people go? Because obviously they didn't live there once the flood happened. And it was a huge civilization. It was one of the ancient civilizations of man, is the Indus Valley civilization. So generally people say, well, they went westwards, but we don't know, So hence you get a lot of these names as well, and in the overflow, they seem very kind of Indian as well, that kind of Indus Valley in origin, like even names like the Gilgamesh, the great things of Mesopotamia, and even the Mitanni people who settle in the Middle East, and they have this obviously very powerful people as well, and all these, their names also seem to have that kind of tone to it. But yeah, this is all just guess, and it doesn't mean anything. Nobody has to take it too seriously. It's just thoughts. But okay, yeah. So cool. So shukran for that, Shahid. I appreciate it. We are getting late here. So but shukran, do send me a message on Instagram. I'll look out for you. Take care. Once again, Jazakallah and
shukran. Thank you, Mufti.
Likewise. People, that was Shahid Kamaruddin. I got carried away in the discussion, as I mentioned. It was epic having him on there and just getting carried away.